Imagine it's the year 2100. You're planning your vacation, scrolling through options. Beach resort? Too crowded, ski trip, been there, done that. But wait, what's this? A 2-week stay at the Lunar Hilton, complete with low-gravity spa treatments and Earthrise views from your room? You click book now. This might sound like pure science fiction, but the foundations for this future are being laid right now. Space tourism isn't a distant dream anymore. It's happening. And the implications are way bigger than just rich people taking joyrides. Because here's the question nobody's really asking. What happens when space travel becomes normal? What happens when Mars has permanent settlements and the Moon has hotels? Does Earth just become the old neighborhood? A museum that future generations visit to see where their ancestors came from? Today, we're exploring the wild, fascinating, and slightly unsettling future of space tourism. We'll look at how we got here, where we're going, and what it means for Earth itself. Because this isn't just about rockets and billionaires. This is about humanity's next chapter. Let's dive in. Alright, let's start with where we are right now. Because space tourism went from maybe someday to actually happening in just a few years. July 20th, 2021. Jeff Bezos climbs aboard his Blue Origin rocket and blasts off. The flight lasts 11 minutes. He reaches the edge of space, experiences weightlessness, and lands back on Earth. Less time than your average lunch break. The person who paid? His seat was bought at auction for $28 million. $28 million. For 11 minutes. 9 days earlier, Richard Branson had beaten Bezos to space aboard his Virgin Galactic spaceplane. The race was on, and Elon Musk? He went even bigger. In September 2021, SpaceX launched 4 civilians on a 3-day orbital mission called Inspiration 4. No professional astronauts, just regular people with a lot of money. The ticket price for that trip? An estimated $55 million per seat. Now I know what you're thinking. This is just toys for billionaires. How is this relevant to me? And you'd be partially right. At current prices, space tourism is absolutely a rich person's game. But here's where it gets interesting. Every transformative technology starts expensive and exclusive. The first computers cost millions. The first mobile phones cost thousands. The first cars were luxury items only the wealthy could afford. Then, economies of scale kick in. Competition drives innovation. Prices drop. And suddenly, what was once impossible becomes normal. Virgin Galactic is currently charging around $450,000 per seat. Still insane, but way cheaper than $28 million. SpaceX is talking about bringing orbital flight costs down to a few million per person within a decade. And their ultimate goal? Making Mars tickets cost around $100,000. Whether that's realistic is debatable. But the trajectory is clear. Space tourism is following the same path as every other technology. Expensive now, cheaper later, eventually accessible. And that's when things get really interesting. But space tourism isn't just about quick trips. The real game changer is permanent infrastructure. Let's talk about the Moon. NASA's Artemis program plans to establish a permanent lunar base by the end of this decade. We're not talking about a few astronauts planting flags. We're talking about a sustained human presence. Research stations, mining operations, and yes, eventually hotels. A company called Orbital Assembly Corporation is seriously planning to build a rotating space station called Voyager Station that could be operational by 2030. It includes restaurants, gyms, and rooms for 400 people, all with artificial gravity. Another company, Axiom Space, is building commercial modules that will attach to the ISS and eventually become a standalone station. They've already sent private astronauts for 10-day stays. At a cost of $55 million each. Even Hilton has announced they're working with Voyager Station to design hotel rooms for space. Hilton, the same company you book for road trips, is planning actual space hotels. And then there's Mars. SpaceX is developing starships specifically for Mars colonization. Musk's stated goal is to establish a self-sustaining city on Mars with 1 million people by 2050. 1 million. It sounds insane, but SpaceX has a track record of doing the impossible. Now, whether we hit these timelines exactly doesn't matter. What matters is the direction. Humanity is building infrastructure for permanent off-world living. And once that infrastructure exists, tourism follows naturally. If there's a research base on the Moon, there will be support staff. If there's staff, there will be hotels. If there are hotels, there will be tourists, restaurants, entertainment. and eventually suburbs. It sounds absurd, but it's the natural progression of human expansion. So what do you think? Is this the exciting next step for humanity, or are we turning our home planet into a historical landmark? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Okay, let's address the elephant in the room. Why would anyone actually want to leave Earth? I mean, Earth is pretty great, right? We've got breathable air, comfortable gravity, pizza, beaches, forests, Netflix. Space has literally none of those things. It's freezing cold, it's incredibly dangerous, it's ridiculously expensive, and you can't even step outside without a spacesuit. So why on earth would this appeal to anyone beyond adventurers and thrill seekers? Well, let's take a quick look at history. Why did Europeans cross the Atlantic to colonize the Americas? Why did pioneers push westward across North America? Why did people leave comfortable lives behind to start over in Australia? The reasons were always complicated. Economic opportunity, religious freedom, adventure, escaping persecution, the promise of land and resources, a fresh start. Space will offer very similar motivations, just updated for the 21st century. Economic opportunity? Absolutely. Asteroid mining could become a trillion-dollar industry. Low-gravity manufacturing could create products that are impossible to make on Earth. Space-based solar power could potentially solve our planet's energy needs. And space tourism itself will be a massive industry. How about a fresh start? For some people, Earth might feel too crowded, too regulated, too politically complicated. Mars would be the ultimate frontier, a place to build new societies with new rules from the ground up. And what about pure scientific curiosity? Living on Mars would be a magnet for researchers, engineers, and anyone who wants to be part of humanity's greatest adventure. And let's be honest, some people will go just because it's cool. Because they can tell their grandkids they were Mars pioneers. Because they want to be a part of history. But here's the factor that nobody really likes to talk about: climate change. If Earth becomes significantly less hospitable, suddenly space doesn't seem so unappealing by comparison. If coastal cities are flooding, if droughts are causing food shortages, if extreme weather becomes the norm, well, a controlled, climate-stable habitat on Mars starts looking pretty good. I'm not saying Earth is going to become unlivable, but the calculation changes when Earth itself becomes more hostile. Space isn't comfortable, but it is predictably uncomfortable. You know exactly what you're dealing with. Now, let's shift gears and talk about what this means economically. Because if large numbers of people really do start living off-world, the economic implications are absolutely staggering. First, there's the wealth transfer. Building infrastructure in space requires massive capital investment. We're talking billions, and eventually trillions, of dollars. That money has to come from somewhere. Initially, it'll be governments and super wealthy individuals. But eventually, it will be regular investment, pension funds, mutual funds, maybe even your own retirement account. Space infrastructure could become the single biggest construction project in all of human history. Just for perspective, the International Space Station cost around $150 billion, and it only houses about 6 people. Now imagine building infrastructure for thousands or even millions of people. The investment required makes things like the interstate highway system look like a weekend DIY project. But here's where it gets really interesting: resource extraction. There's an asteroid out there named 16 Psyche that's believed to contain iron, nickel, and gold worth approximately $10,000 quadrillion. No, that is not a typo. Quadrillion, with a Q that's more than the entire global economy combined. Now, if we actually brought all that material back to Earth, it would crash every single commodity market and probably cause a total economic collapse. But we don't need to bring it back to Earth. We could use those resources to build more space infrastructure. Suddenly, space becomes self-sustaining. You mine asteroids to build space stations. Those space stations house workers who then mine more asteroids. The cycle continues and space begins to develop its own independent economy. And that is the exact moment the relationship between Earth and our new space civilization starts to get very complicated. Now here's where things get really fascinating and a bit speculative. What happens to Earth when humanity actually starts spreading across the solar system? The best way to think about this is to look at our own history. Think about when Europeans colonized the Americas. Europe didn't just vanish. It stayed incredibly important. But the whole dynamic of the world shifted. The Americas became the new frontier, a place of opportunity and explosive growth. Europe became the old country, the place your ancestors came from. Still culturally significant, but no longer the only game in town. We could see the exact same pattern play out between Earth and space. Earth will always be our ancestral home, the cradle of humanity. It will hold immense cultural and historical weight. But over centuries, the real centers of economic power and population might shift outwards. Picture a future where massive cities on Mars are humming with life, powered by endless solar energy and built with resources mined from asteroids. Imagine research hubs on the Moon and vast orbital habitats housing millions. In that future, Earth's role changes. It might become less of a driver of innovation and more of a heritage site. A living museum. A place people visit to see where it all began, to experience our planet's unique, vibrant biosphere, to walk under a real sky and natural gravity. Now I know that sounds a little dystopian at first, the idea of Earth as a museum. But is it really? Museums are vital. They preserve our history and culture. Being the ancestral home of all of humanity is a pretty prestigious title. Plus, Earth will always have things that nowhere else in the solar system can offer. Natural beauty, breathable air, a self-sustaining ecosystem, comfortable gravity. In a future filled with artificial habitats, these things might become the ultimate luxury experiences. Space tourism could become a two-way street. Colonists from Mars might take vacations to Earth just to feel rain on their skin, swim in an ocean, or walk through a forest. Earth could become a destination resort for people who grew up in the sterile environments of space. It's a strange reversal, but it makes a lot of sense. But let's go even deeper and talk about the cultural impact. Because becoming a multi-planet species will fundamentally change our identity. For all of recorded history, we've been Earthlings. Every single culture, every civilization, every person who has ever lived has called this planet home. It's our entire frame of reference. What happens when children are born on Mars? When there are people who have never set foot on Earth? When Martian stops being a sci-fi trope and becomes a real, lived identity? Those Mars-born humans will see the world completely differently. They'll grow up in lower gravity, which will literally change their physical development. Their days will be 40 minutes longer. For them, Earth won't be home. It'll be a bright blue dot in their night sky. Culturally, they'll inevitably develop their own slang, their own customs, their own ways of thinking, just like American culture diverged from British culture. And this leads to the big, uncomfortable question. Will Martian colonies stay loyal to Earth? Or will they eventually demand their independence? This isn't some wild conspiracy theory. It's a repeating pattern in human history. Colonies almost always seek autonomy. The American colonies declared independence from Europe. Australia forged its own identity. Why would Mars be any different? People are already having serious discussions about how a Martian society would be governed. Would it be ruled by Earth-based governments? By corporations? Or by some new form of democracy designed for a space settlement? Elon Musk has quipped that Mars might not recognize Earth's legal authority. And while that's classic Musk provocation, it highlights a very real challenge. How do you enforce Earth's laws on another planet when it takes 20 minutes just for a radio signal to make a round trip? We could be planting the seeds for humanity's first truly independent off-world civilization right now. And Earth's role in that future relationship is one of the biggest questions we'll have to answer. Okay, let's pump the brakes a bit and talk reality. Because while I've been painting this grand vision of humanity spreading across the solar system, there are massive obstacles we haven't overcome yet. First, the cost. Space travel is still incredibly expensive. We need huge cost reductions, true reusability, and economies of scale that just don't exist yet. Second, safety. Space is constantly trying to kill you. Radiation exposure on a Mars trip could significantly increase cancer risk. Bone density loss and the psychological effects of isolation are serious problems. One major disaster could set space tourism back decades. Third, life support. Creating self-sustaining habitats is incredibly hard. We haven't even proven we can grow enough food and space to feed a small crew long-term, let alone an entire city. Every breath of air, every drop of water has to be carefully managed. Then there's the distance. Mars is 6 months away, and that is a long time to be trapped in a metal can with no real-time communication to Earth. If something goes wrong, you're on your own. And finally, we have an ethical obligation not to contaminate other worlds with Earth life, and vice versa. So realistically, what's the timeline? Space tourism to orbit? That's happening now. Lunar tourism? Probably within the next 10 to 15 years. Mars tourism? Harder to predict. Some say the 2030s, others say 2050 or beyond. Large-scale space settlements? We're talking decades, maybe even a century. But here's the thing about exponential technologies. They seem impossible until suddenly they're inevitable. So, what does all this mean for Earth? I don't think Earth becomes irrelevant. Its identity just evolves. Earth will remain the biological and cultural center of humanity. We evolved here. Our bodies, our history, every language and tradition we have, all started right here. For generations, most humans will still be born on Earth, but Earth might lose its monopoly on economic and technological innovation. That could shift to space, where resources are abundant and there's more room to experiment. Think of Earth becoming like Europe in the modern world, still important, rich in history and culture, but no longer the only place where big things happen. And for many people, that might be fine. Not everyone wants to live on the cutting edge. Earth offers stability, tradition, and natural beauty that artificial habitats never will. This could even create a new kind of tourism. Imagine people from space colonies visiting Earth for a heritage tour. Visit Earth, the original human experience. See wildlife and actual natural habitats, not biodomes. Experience real weather, sun, rain, snow. It sounds a little funny now, but it's not so different from how we market historical sites today. Alright, let's wrap this up. Space tourism is in its infancy, but it's real and it's accelerating. The direction is clear. Humanity is becoming a multi-planet species. In the best-case scenario, Earth benefits from this expansion while maintaining its unique role as our birthplace. Most likely, we'll see a bit of both. Industries will move to space, some people will migrate, but Earth will remain home for the vast majority of us for a long, long time. So maybe the museum analogy isn't so negative. Museums preserve what's valuable. They're places of education and appreciation. If Earth becomes a museum of humanity, maybe that means we're finally valuing and protecting the planet that gave us life. Spreading to space doesn't mean abandoning Earth. It means securing our future while appreciating our past. Pioneers who left their homes for new continents didn't hate where they came from. They were seeking opportunity and they kept strong ties to their ancestral lands. Space pioneers will feel the same way about Earth. No matter how far we travel, it will always be home. We're not leaving Earth behind. We're carrying it with us in our biology, our culture, and our hearts. We're just expanding the definition of home to include the stars. So here's my question for you. If you had the chance to be part of the first wave of space settlers, would you go? Would you leave Earth for a new life on Mars or in a space station? Or would you stay and watch from here? I'm genuinely curious. Drop your answer in the comments. And if you enjoyed this, hit that subscribe button. The age of space tourism is here, and Earth's next chapter is just beginning. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.